Hello and welcome. This is an introduction to web development using Python and Flask. During this introduction series, you are going to learn how to build simple yet beautiful applications for the web, and our tools of choice are going to be Python and Flask. To begin with, let's understand these two things. What is Flask and what is Python? A quick search of what Flask is from the internet, we find out that Flask is a micro web framework written in Python. It is classified as a micro framework because it does not require particular tools or libraries. In other words, Flask is a framework that can be used to build applications. If you want to read more about Flask, you can check out their documentation. It is very exhaustive and authoritative about Flask. The next thing that we want to understand before we begin is Python. Again, a very quick search of what Python is from the internet, we find out that Python is actually a programming language. It is more specifically defined as an interpreted, high-level, and general-purpose programming language. Python's design philosophy emphasizes on code readability with notable use of significant indentation. One more time, if you want to familiarize yourself more with Python, you can check out their documentation. Let's begin. I will be using Ubuntu 20.04 during the development of our simple web application. First off, you have to ensure that you have Python installed. For Ubuntu 20.04, it comes pre-installed with Python, so I do not have to install Python in my computer. But if your computer does not have Python, ensure that you download a version that's compatible with your machine from the website python.org. Once you have it installed, navigate into a folder where you want to start making your project. Once you are in the folder where you want to start making your project, ensure that you have a code editor set up for your computer. I have VS Code set up already, so I'm going to start it. The good thing with the VS Code editor is it comes with an inbuilt terminal, which makes my efficiency much higher. What do I mean? Instead of having to switch from the inbuilt terminal that comes with the Ubuntu OS, I can pretty much use the one that's found within the VS Code. Next, we need to create a structure for our application. And don't worry if you do not understand what I mean with a structure for the application. Just do what I'm going to show you, and within no time you'll understand what I mean, that it's important for you to create a structure for your application. So I'm going to start by creating a folder called app, and you can see that every time I create a folder and a file, it will be showing up towards the left of the terminal. So I have a folder called app, and I'm also going to create a couple of files, and the first file that I'm going to create is called app.py. I'm also going to add Flask env file, and here they are. I'm going to move into the created app folder, and within it I'm going to create more files. I use the command touch to create empty files, and the first file that I'm going to create within the app subfolder is init.py. This file is going to be the application's instance, and I will also need routes.py. If I click on the app subfolder, you can see that I have the two files set up already. Now we have a very simple structure for our application. We have a folder called app, and we also have two files, app.py and .flask env. The app.py will be the entry point to our application every time we start our Flask server. The .flask env is going to hold the environment variables that Flask expects before it starts the server. And the app subfolder will house this file, the init.py file, that will start as the application's instance. And the routes.py file will hold view functions. We now need to create and activate a virtual environment. What is a virtual environment? A virtual environment is a concept where you isolate the needs of your application from that of your computer or any other project that you might be working on. It helps you to install packages that are specifically for your project. In our case, we're going to install a couple of packages, and the first package is going to be called Flask. So we need to create a virtual environment that will house this project called Flask. How do you create and activate your virtual environment? I'm going to use this command called make virtualenv, and I'm going to call my virtual environment YT intro. The make virtualenv command comes from virtualenv wrapper. It not only creates but also activates a virtual environment for me. I prefer to use it because it's like a two-in-one command. So it's very efficient for me. But before you use it, you have to set up your machine to start using the virtualenv wrapper command. I will leave a link in the description if you do not know what that command is or how to set it up in your computer. Now that we have our virtual environment created and activated, let's go ahead and install the Flask package. Python comes with a tool called pip. Pip is used to install packages. So I'm going to use pip3 install Flask. If you do not have pip3, please ensure that you install it by a simple Google search and you'll find out how you can install it. Flask should be installed in my virtual environment in no time. With the Flask package installed, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create an instance of the Flask package within the init file. So I'm going to say from Flask import Flask with a capital F, then app equals Flask name, and then at the very bottom I'm going to import the routes module from app import routes. So I've created an instance of the Flask package and I'm importing the routes module, which is this file right here within the app subfolder at the bottom of init.py. This is specifically to avoid circular dependencies issues. We are going to move into the routes module, and within this module we are going to first begin by importing the Flask instance. And how do we do that? We're going to say from app import app, and then we're going to create routes for it using the app that we've imported, app.route. And then I'm also going to say app.route home, and then this is the function that handles this view function. And then I'm going to return a very simple text that says hello world. So every time we call this view function, it's going to return hello world. After we have completed creating a very simple view function, we are going to go into the app.py file, which is at the top level directory of our project, and make it an entry point for our application. And all we're going to do is say from app import app. That's pretty much it. This imports the app instance of our application, and the app instance of our application is the one that holds the Flask package. Before we see the results of our work, we need to install another package that will help with the running of our Flask server. This package is called python.env. The python.env package helps with the importation of environment variables. These are variables that Flask expects before it starts the Flask server. So a simple pip3 install python.env is going to install this package in our virtual environment. And now we can go ahead and create simple Flask environment variables and they are called Flask app equals the entry point of our application, and then the second one is Flask env. We are creating this application in a development environment, so we're going to define it as development and Flask Debug to enable the debugging features of Flask, and I'm going to say it as true. So every time we run our application and there is an issue or we make changes to our application, having set up Flask Debug equals to true will enable the features to be automatically reloaded. With that setup on our terminal, we can now start our Flask server by running Flask Run command. You can see that we have our environment set to development, and we can access our application from this link. This is the localhost link, and our debugger is active. So I'm going to copy this link and paste it on a tab. So when I paste it here and run it, I have the word hello world showing up right there. And this is it. You have made your very first web application where you are printing hello world on a browser.